Okay, I hope you can all hear me and see me. Welcome to our next webinar in our Learn with LINX series. Today, the plan is to talk a little bit about two services that we have been offering for quite a while across our different peering LANs, and they're Private VLAN closed user group. Let me start sharing my screen, and then we can talk what we're going to go through today. Okay. So as I said, the topic today is Private VLAN closed user groups. I'm going to start a little bit with an introduction about our peering LANs in general, the fabrics underneath it, and then we're going to talk about the two services, try to give some examples how they can be used, but also talk about the functionality, the features, why they even exist, and then we'll leave a little bit of time for questions at the end. So first, in general, like any internet exchange out there, the main service that we provide across our network fabrics, it's of course the peering LAN. It really basically, and that hasn't changed in many years. It is just a layer 2 instance. It's a layer 2 broadcast domain where every member that is connected to that peering LAN is connected into that same broadcast domain and can exchange traffic with any other member on that same peering LAN. What you can do, how you can use it in the case of LINX, but it's very similar for any internet exchange. It's normally defined in LINX case in our MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, which defines how you can use it, what you can do across that LAN, which especially as in most of our LANs, they're quite large. There's quite a lot of different networks connected to it. There need to be some rules on what traffic you can send, how you can send the traffic, and what you can and can't do. And it's normally used for bilateral or multilateral peering connections between members. That's really its purpose. Multilateral, in this case, meaning we provide a route server that you can set up a session to, and it will give you immediately peering with anybody else who is on that route server, or bilateral, meaning you just have a direct BGP session with any other member. The IP addresses, they get allocated by the IXP, in this case by us, by LINX. They are kind of public IP addresses, even though the MOU clearly tells you you're not allowed to announce these to the rest of the internet. They are, in most cases, depends a little bit how members run their own internal infrastructure, but normally they are reachable within the network of members. And as a consequence, they're not really, they're kind of exposed to the internet. And that is one of the, I wouldn't call it a disadvantage, it is just how peering LANs work. For some members or for some use cases, that might not be an ideal situation, since basically you have a port of your infrastructure which is kind of exposed to the outside and can be reachable from many places. Private VLAN closed user group kind of work a little bit around that. Another important part that is worth mentioning, it's how is actually your port configured when you connect. And again, this is very similar to most internet exchanges. The default, the most standard setup when you order a port at an internet exchange, and at LINX by default, if you order a 10 gig port, a 100 gig port, the port will simply get set up as what you call an access port. There's no tagging on the port, so no encapsulation. So it is really, it can only be used for a single service, and that port will get added into the layer 2 domain. That obviously means that is the most frequent use case. The port will get used only for peering service. and there is no other service that you can add to that same port without changing configuration. The bandwidth could be limited by rate limiting, i.e. if you have a 5 gig service on a 10 gig port, that can still be delivered on a simple access port, but we restrict the bandwidth on the port to the service that you have purchased. The other option that you can choose, and you can choose that when you straight away when you order the port, or at a later stage, you can go back to the port to our LINX member portal and request the configuration of your port to be changed, is to configure the port as an 802.1q, a trunk port, basically. That means any service that you have on that port will be presented to you as a .1q interface, VLAN interface, sub-interface on your port. If you convert an existing port which has been used for peering, by default, we then change your peering service and present it to you on VLAN ID 100 as a default. Again, the same, that service can either have as bandwidth the full port bandwidth, or it can be one of the available bandwidth selections that we allow you, i.e. 2 gig, 3 gig, 5 gig on 10 gig ports, or 30 gig on a 100 gig port. And again, the service, the individual services will be limited to that speed. There is a second option if you change your port into what we call multi-service port, is to actually enable Q&Q support on that port. Now there are some restrictions, and actually what happens by default, most of our equipment actually allows Q&Q by default. But if you use Q&Q, you certainly are aware that means you need an additional 4 byte in your header to represent the additional tag. So basically, when you change a port to Q&Q, at our end, we change the MTU of the port, we increase it by 4 bytes to allow you that you can still carry 1500 byte packets through that port. But that also means that if you enable Q&Q, you can really only use that port for these additional services. The initial reason why we introduced the support for Q&Q actually comes from some of our Cloud Connect products, i.e. some of the Azure Express Route variations. Depending on how you want to use it, you need to enable Q&Q. That's why we started to introduce it, but it is also available on Private VLANs for an example. But as we increase the MTU of the port, we do not let you use that same port for peering service. So it would need to be a dedicated port that you use for Private VLAN or Cloud Connect services, simply to prevent some corner cases where, due to an MTU mismatch, there might be packets dropped across the LAN and pretty hard to troubleshoot, depending on other members' network equipment and how they handle MTU path discovery. So that's really just the introduction. So we have our fabrics, and even though we use different hardware and software vendors on our different networks, the functionality and the way it works is very similar. And from a member point of view, from a customer point of view, it all looks the same. Most of our networks these days, they are EVPN, VXLAN based networks. So that's how we create the layer 2 instance for the peering LAN. Which then brings us to the first of the 2 products we're going to talk about, and it's Private VLAN. What is Private VLAN? It is very simple. It is a point-to-point layer 2 service between either 2 members, or we now also allow you to use it between your own ports. So between 2 of your ports on the same network fabric, across that same network fabric. We have had questions, well, can I use it if my 2 ports are on the same side? Yeah, you can. Depending on your bandwidth needs, it might be cheaper to just buy a simple cross-connect, a direct cross-connect. But especially between sites on our peering LANs, and all of the peering LANs where this is available, they're all multi-sites, some larger, some smaller. If you have equipment of your own into different sites, you can use Private VLAN to create yourself a direct point-to-point connection between your ports across the network, or to any other member that wants it. By default, similar as we configure peering LAN ports, we restrict it to a single MAC address at the port. But on request, we can increase that up to 200 MAC addresses. Again, it depends on your use case, what you are using the service for. And again, it's 1500 byte MTU, and as I mentioned before, so by definition is .1Q, but you have the ability to change your port config to support Q&Q, increases the MTU. You can use Q&Q on any port, even if configured as .1Q. The equipment at our end supports it either way, but obviously you decrease the remaining MTU in that case if you don't change the config of the port. What are the benefits? I mentioned before your port on the peering LAN. It's kind of a public port. It is to a certain degree exposed. That's not true here. These ports are the service is only exposed at the two endpoints. If they are two of your ports, or a port at your end and another member that you are connecting to, they're not exposed to anything else unless you expose them. It is its own fully dedicated layer 2 instance across our network, so fully separated on every level. You can use your existing ports if you want to do so, if you have bandwidth available, i.e. you're using a 2 gig peering service on a 10 gig port, leaves you 8 gigs free that you can use for private VLANs, or you have a 100 gig port with a 30 gig peering service, leaves you loads of bandwidth left for other services. But you can also, of course, order new ports and have it on dedicated ports. It is by definition the way the service is designed. It's a fully resilient service, i.e. the point-to-point links, they are not nailed down to a specific path across our network. They're dynamically routed across the network. So even if a site loses one of its connections to the rest of the networks, your service will always be on the active circuit, and all of the failover is fully dynamic, and in most cases not noticeable that there even was a failure. So it's by default across our platform. It's a fully resilient service. The IP address allocation, well, it's done by the members, by whoever owns the service, whoever orders the service. We don't really care. We don't see it. For us, it's just a layer 2 connection. So it's fully up to you how you allocate the IP addresses, what you do with the service, what traffic you pass. The ordering of it, the configuration of it, it's a fully automated process, like pretty much all of our services nowadays. So assuming that your port and the other member's port is already configured as a multi-service port, it will get pretty much provisioned immediately. The way that the process works, obviously, if there are 2 ports of your own, it's very simple since you approve both ends of the port. If you order a private VLAN to another member, you can obviously not place an order for that other member. So the way the process works, you place the order, you indicate who the second member is that you want to connect to. You complete your end of the order. The order kind of then goes into a hold status. The second member gets an invitation, is probably the best way to call it, to confirm that he wants to connect with you across that private VLAN. which means he can go to his portal. He will see that invitation from you to establish that private VLAN. He can, if he's okay to go ahead, he selects the ports at his end where he wants this to be delivered. He can order a new port or can use an existing port. If he chooses an existing port, again, it will pretty much happen immediately once our system has the information from that second member, which port he wants. The service will get provisioned, and you get confirmation that the service is now live. As soon as it's live, billing will start for the service. You can change the bandwidth at any time. These services do not come with a 30-day minimum term. You can change or either increase or decrease the bandwidth at any point in time. Again, if both ends of the service are your ports, obviously you can approve it. If you increase the bandwidth or decrease the bandwidth, the same process happens. The request goes to the other member, the other participant, and once he approves the change, we'll go ahead and if bandwidth is available, if there isn't enough bandwidth available, yes, the option to move it to a different port at the same time. And like any of our services on the member portal, you can see traffic stats of these services. If we have time at the end, I can show you, can give you a quick overview how all of this looks in the portal. Some use cases, there is an endless number of use cases. The most typical ones that we have seen so far, it's members selling either full or partial transit to other members. We all know that this has been done across the peering LAN by simply having an agreement between two members, and instead of just announcing their own prefixes, they announce to the other member either a full table or partial table. We all know, even initially in the early days of internet exchanges, kind of was forbidden, but I think pretty much everybody knows that this happens and it's tolerated. But it has the disadvantage, especially if you sell transit to many different members, billing can become quite complex since you don't really have an easy interface where you can measure the amount of traffic. If you use private VLANs for this, you have one dedicated interface for each of your customers where you sell the transit, and makes many of this very simple. You and another member might be sharing a service or want to interconnect your networks for a specific reason. Simple to do with private VLAN, quick to do, even if it's only temporary, which is the last case. If you have network migrations, customer migrations, you might need a temporary or longer term connection between two networks. A very simple way to do this by using private VLAN. If you use them for your own network, as I said, we don't really mind. You could, with some members using it as a backup link for a physical point-to-point link between sites. You might need a temporary connection for some changes in your network. Again, it's easy to do if you use existing ports where you have bandwidth available. You don't need to order additional cross connects, take time. You just bring the service up. Once you no longer need it, you can cancel it again. Or you can extend your network to sites where you might not yet be present, but you might want to pick up a customer there. Many use cases for it. In the end, it is just a point-to-point link, layer 2 link across any of the sites on any specific fabric. It is actually also available through our resellers if you want to. So even if you're a remote member, you can talk to your reseller and order a private VLAN to another member. Works exactly the same way. That's really private VLAN, very simple. Closed user group, it's not much different. Instead of having 2 members or 2 ports of your own, we now have 3 members. guess what? It is nothing else than yet again a private layer 2 instance between at least two. Well, obviously, you can also have a closed user group with only yourself, your own port in it, but there's not going to be much traffic on that. So the typical use cases that you have more than one members or multiple members, multiple ports from a different member, depends on your use case. But otherwise, it is exactly the same. It is just a private layer 2 instance, your own layer 2 broadcast domain for any service that you want. The member who orders the service, it's what we call the owner. He controls who can join the closed user group, who can participate in it. So it's always the owner who has full control over the closed user group. The ports that are connected, the services that are connected into the closed user group, they don't need to have all the same bandwidth. Obviously, on a private VLAN, by definition of the service, it's 2 points linked together. There would be no benefit of having different bandwidths at each end. So they always, by default, on a private VLAN, the bandwidth at both ends is always going to be the same. The person who orders it as a 5 gig. The other member needs to choose 5 gig at the same end. That is different for closed user group, since again, there's lots of use cases depending on what you use it for, that you might want to have different bandwidths, different speeds on the different connections. So you remember if you're offering a service and one member needs less bandwidth to your service, you can connect with a smaller bandwidth. The only restriction is the bandwidth of any individual port gets basically the maximum bandwidth gets defined when you order the service. If you order a 10 gig closed user group, it means the maximum bandwidth that any port that connects into that closed user group is 10 gig. If you only order a 50 meg closed user group, it means that sets the maximum bandwidth that can be used on any of the other services. So whatever the owner orders as bandwidth at the start of the process, it's what defining it. But again, this can be changed, increased, decreased. So same benefits, very similar to private VLAN. It is a fully private, secure service. It's your own dedicated layer 2 instance. Only ports that you have allowed to be connected to it will get connected to it. Otherwise, it's completely separate from anything else. Same as private VLAN. It can be delivered on existing ports, or you can order dedicated ports just for this service. Again, same as for private VLAN, it's fully resilient service. The paths across our network are not nailed down to specific links. Traffic will reroute if there is a failure of an individual link across our fabric. Traffic will reroute. Again, no surprise, the IP address allocation, it's all in your hand. It's normally the owner who defines, since especially if you have multiple members connected to it, you obviously need one person to decide. So by definition, normally it is the owner who decides. But again, we don't really get involved at all. Ordering, provisioning of it is fully automated. As I mentioned already, bandwidth can be increased or decreased at any time. And members or ports can be added or removed by the owner of the closed user group through the portal at any point in time. If you offer a service and you have a new customer coming on board, and you know that he's already a member on the same network fabric, same LINX network fabric, you can just tell him, you can basically invite him through your portal. So the owner goes to the portal. He has the option to invite a new member to join his closed user group. the member who gets the invitation can go to the portal, confirms the bandwidth, confirms the port where he wants the service to be delivered, and once he has done so, the service will be configured and he will be added into the closed user group. And again, the same, no surprise here. Traffic stats are available, of course, for the service. The members who join it obviously only see their connection. The owner of the closed user group actually sees the bandwidth of all of the ports that are connected to his closed user group. He can see the traffic across all of them. Some use cases, the most popular one, it's member offering a service to other members. We have a number which are across, which are using our network fabrics for that. We have a provider of DDoS service mitigation service, scrubbing services, which uses the closed user group as the back pass, the return pass for clean traffic back to the customers using it. And there are many use cases. We're in discussion with members who provide voice over IP services and kind of want to share their service, having a closer connection between, and as there are multiple of them. The idea there is, again, using a closed user group for their own that they can use to connect their service together. There can be situations where you want to have a private network for some of your partners to connect into your network to again, very simple to do with a closed user group. And there's much more we can do, and we have on a regular basis discussions with members. We actually internally use closed user group for a number of use cases, and it's quite easy for us to work with you to kind of provide a more customized service. You could imagine that you want a closed user group, but you really want to use it a little bit more like a peering LAN. You have a dedicated root server in it, or whatever, there is many variations. One of the service that we provide is the Microsoft Azure peering service. The way that's implemented, it is basically closed user group, in this case owned by LINX. Anybody who buys that service gets invited into that closed user group, which also has a root server, and that's how we deliver that service. So there is a near endless combination of things that you can do. The easiest to do is come talk to us and see what we can do and how we can work with you on this. I see there was a question in the chat, if you can peer with members using closed user group. I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. Obviously, anybody who is within a closed user group can peer with each other, since in the end they are just connected into that same layer 2 domain, and you can use it in any way you wish. A member who's connected only into a closed user group, obviously anybody who's not also in that same closed user group couldn't peer with them. You would, and you could, in theory, see members who connect to LINX, but don't want to participate in the peering LAN and only want to participate in one or more closed user groups. So far, we haven't seen that. So far, all of our members, they come and join LINX for the peering side of things. So they have a peering service, but then they order additional service on top of that. So you probably peer with them across the peering LAN and use the closed user group for that. Okay. So in this specification, so this specific, I'm looking at the follow-up question in there. So it's like the DDoS mitigation using NAWAS. Do you have to peer with NAWAS from common VLAN and get the return traffic? it's probably more a question for NAWAs how they prefer it. I think the majority of the time you probably peer with NAWAs across the peering LAN, but it actually isn't their main use case. Their main use case is really to have a simple and easy direct return pass, clean traffic return pass from NAWAs. It's probably a better question to talk to NB-IP NAWAs directly for the question about that service. But otherwise, interesting question. The first question, the earlier question that you had, if you can get a full internet routing table using Private VLAN. If there is, and we know that we have some of our members who are present on our peering LANs, they're very happy to offer you, to basically sell you transit, meaning giving you a full routing table and using Private VLAN to deliver that service. So yes. It probably depends on the specific peering LAN where you are, if there are any partners involved who are happy to offer it. If in worst case, you can always talk to our sales team, and they can probably give you contacts of members that you could approach for this. Okay. Last couple of words about Private VLAN closed user group. Where are they available? They're available pretty much across all of our fabrics these days. We started initially on LAN 1, expanded it to LAN 2. We added Manchester and Northern Virginia during last year. And it is also available on our latest exchange in Nairobi. So the only two exchanges currently where it isn't available is Scotland and Wales, which are also the smallest, and it's really based on demand that we see from members. If we see demand, there's certainly no reason to also make it available in those places. Bandwidth, currently by default, it's available at speed starting at as low as 50 megs per second. It goes up to 10 gig. We can actually offer it, and we had requests for that at even higher bandwidths. They're currently not available immediately to order them through the portal directly if it's above 10 gig. The main reason for that is really just to have a little bit more control over capacity planning, since the use cases for private VLANs might be different. We have a very good view in our traffic planning predictions and capacity planning. For normal services, it's a little bit a higher risk on these services. So we really just want to have a little bit more of an understanding, and depending on the use cases, but we can make them available at higher bandwidth. The pricing, as for any of our service, it is public. You can see it on our website. The link is here. If you go to the website, look at service fees, you will find the pricing. The pricing is it might look a little bit more complex, but it dates from, it comes from the time that when we changed the port pricing and the service pricing. So there's a bandwidth element that you get charged based on that changes based on the bandwidth of the service. And that pretty much covers most of what we wanted to talk about. I do have a little bit of a slot left for question. If there are any more questions besides the ones that were answered already, feel free to ask them now. If not, let's give it a minute or two. If not, in this case, well, I thank you as always. Thank you very much for attending. If any question comes up, if you have any further questions that maybe you don't want to ask here, drop me an email, contact me at any time, or contact any of LINX members of staff. who can pass your questions on. But as always, pleasure to have seen you here this morning. The webinar will also be available later on as a recording if you want to go back to anything. But yes, that's it from my side. Thank you so much.